Thank you for joining us here at the First Alert Desk on Atlanta News First Plus. We are moments away from taking you live to remarks by Georgia Governor Brian Kemp as he's expected to sign a regulatory reform legislation package he says will cut the red tape and streamline government operations. Now, this is part of a set of bills that he's really been signing throughout the week, focused on education, public safety, and other issues that were central to the legislative session. And this morning, we took you out live to the 2026 fiscal year budget signing that Governor Kemp also delivered remarks at ahead of signing the budget into law. And I do believe we have a live picture now inside the Georgia State Capitol. We're going to take you out there live so you can see what's going on. The governor getting ready to take to that podium and give remarks ahead of signing this regulatory reform bills, the set of bills, I should say, into law. Let's take a listen.
Welcome back. Honored to have our great First Lady Marty Kemp with us again this afternoon. She, like I, is looking forward to having legislation signed making government more efficient and reducing the burden for hardworking Georgians. I also just want to thank Secretary Raffensperger for being here with us today. Members of the General Assembly, we know who the hardworking people are that have stuck around for this afternoon on a Friday, and many other folks that have worked on this legislation. As you all remember, I ran for governor on the promise to make government smaller, better, and more efficient. And we've made great strides in that ongoing effort, and I'm thankful to many of the allies who are standing here with me today and many others throughout the state who have helped us with those initiatives. Today, I'll sign the latest measures into law that will build on our past achievements in making government streamlined and more responsive. So y'all bear with me as I go through this. I'll try to move quickly. First is House Bill 113, one of my administration's priorities that was sponsored by Floor Leader Lauren McDonald in the House and carried by Floor Leader Bo Hatchett in the Senate. We all know too well that we have to stay vigilant against the enemies of our nation and the values of freedom. That's why we prioritize the passage of this bill that directs the Georgia Technology Authority to establish and keep an updated list of companies and products made or sold by citizens or governments of countries designated as foreign adversaries by the U.S. Secretary of Commerce. We will keep our state government free from interference from those who oppose democracy, and I'm proud to sign this legislation to help us do just that. Next, I'll sign House Bill 81, sponsored by Representative John Carson, who's with us today, and carried in the Senate by Billy Hickman. This bill authorizes 2 additional pathways for certified public accountants to receive their license, helping us meet Georgians where they are and ease the burdens of those looking to fulfill critical careers like this. Next, I'll sign House Bill 322, sponsored by Representative Lee Hawkins and carried by Senator Max Burns. This bill enables the Board of Dentistry to issue a teacher's or instructor's license to applicants licensed to practice in another state, country, or territory while they are employed at an accredited school or college. We have a strong need for more dentists across our state, and this legislation will be an important step in addressing that need, along with the other steps that we've taken, like establishing a new dental school in Savannah. I'll also sign House Bill 579, sponsored by Representative Matt Reeves, who's got his Georgia Bulldogs attire on today, and carried in the Senate by Larry Walker, who's also with us. Born out of the work of the Joint Blue Ribbon Study Committee from last summer, it streamlines the licensure process and removes barriers of entry to get to work in Georgia. Next, I'll sign House Bill 630, sponsored by Representative Marcus Wiedauer, who's with us, and carried again by Senator Larry Walker. This bill, also a result of the Joint Blue Ribbon Study Committee, revises the composition of the State Board of Registration of Used Motor Vehicle Dealers and Used Motor Vehicle Parts Dealers. I think next year we need to streamline the name of that board. It also updates the minimum requirements for operational used auto dealers to address bad actors within the industry. so that hardworking Georgians do not fall victims to these scams. I will then sign House Bill 635, sponsored by Representative Wiedauer again and carried by Senator Walker. Another blue ribbon bill, this legislation makes licensing requirements more objective by reducing individual discretion, promoting fairness, and streamlining the three pathways to licensure for residential basic, residential light, commercial, and residential general contractors. As a former builder myself, I can tell you firsthand how my negative interactions with bureaucracy led me to my work in public service. So I am grateful to be signing this bill to help our builders unlock the American dream for more Georgians. I'll also sign SB 96, sponsored again by floor leader Senator Drew Eccles and carried by floor leader Matt Gamble in the House. Another priority for my administration, it reduces the bureaucratic burden on state agencies by reducing the number of boards that have grown inactive or perform duplicative roles. With every budget and every legislative session, I'm proud to remind folks that we are not for growing government in Georgia. So I'll gladly sign this legislation that decreases the number of hoops that we have to jump through to get things done and also reduces the size of government. Finally, I'll sign Senate Bill 125, sponsored by, again, Senator Larry Walker and carried by Representative Lee Hawkins in the House. This bill takes multiple steps in streamlining the licensure process, making it easier to get Georgians in the workforce. It decouples the pathway to licensure for professional engineers and land surveyors, allowing individuals to take their licensing exam after they graduate from an educational program and before acquiring their experiential requirements. It authorizes the Secretary of State's office to implement a third-party electronic database to monitor compliance of certain licenses where continuing education courses are required for renewal. And it updates language relating to many other critical professions. With unprecedented job growth across the state, we have the need for more workers across Georgia, and legislation like this makes it easier for us to fill that need and give hardworking Georgians the opportunity they deserve. Every day we serve the people of Georgia, and it's important for us to remember that we work for them. It's our job to help streamline their experiences with government, make it easier for them to access opportunity, and limit as best we can the challenges they may face in accessing new skills and good careers. I'm proud the bills I'll now sign will help us accomplish that. And with that, we'll put some pen to paper. Thank y'all for being with us.
If you are here for House Bill 113, if you'll please make your way over here and we'll get you placed behind the governor. Our next bill is going to be House Bill 148, so if you want to go ahead and make your way over here if you're here for that bill. All right, the governor's about to sign House Bill 148, and the next bill will be House Bill 322, if you want to go ahead and make your way over to my right. All right, if you are here for House Bill 322, we'll go ahead and get you in your position. If you are here for House Bill 579, if you want to go ahead and make your way over here to the right. If you're here for House Bill 579, you can come get in position now. If you are here for House Bill 630, if you'll please come over here to the right. All right. If you're here for House Bill 635, you can go ahead and make your way over to the right. All right, House Bill 635, and then the next bill will be Senate Bill 96. All right, we have Senate Bill 96, and then after that, our last bill will be Senate Bill 125. All right, 125.
The world. But this week, Governor Brian Kemp, the outgoing governor here in the state of Georgia, who is term limited and coming up on his final year and a half in the governor's mansion, decided he does not want, at least for now, to run for the United States Senate. And that is our top political headline on this week's edition of Political Update here on Atlanta News First and AtlantaNewsFirst.com for Friday, May 9th, 2025. I'm Tim Darnell, joined by my friend and colleague Rick Folbaum, who had to hold the fort down last week when I was out of town, which I'm very grateful for, Rick. Thank you. But got back to work on Monday, and it was about the middle of the day, toward the early part of the afternoon, that we got the announcement that Governor Brian Kemp has decided not to challenge incumbent Democratic Senator, U.S. Senator John Ossoff in 2026. He was widely seen as perhaps the Republicans' best candidate for hopefully unseating Senator Ossoff, and this is a race that the Republican National Senatorial Committee has targeted as a prime pickup in 2026. Now what?
Well, you're right. Republicans desperately want to win back this seat, and they feel like they can. They look at John Ossoff, who narrowly won in 2020, and they see someone who is perhaps vulnerable, even though polling suggests that Senator Ossoff's position might be slightly better than a lot of people think as far as support goes right now. They still have identified this seat as one that they want to target, and so much so that they really sort of put their energies behind trying to convince Governor Kemp to get on board and run for this. Going so far as coming down to Atlanta in recent weeks, John Thune and Rick Scott, two of the senior Republicans, the Senate Majority Leader and the head of the Republican Senatorial Committee, coming down to Atlanta to meet with Governor Kemp to sort of make their pitch. But, I think that at the end of the day, Governor Kemp took a look at the U.S. Senate, which you very generously called the greatest deliberative body. I think that might have been the case some years ago. Some people would make the argument that they've drifted away from that somewhat over the last 10 years or so. But I think that he saw the idea of being one of 100. And coming from the chief executive role, as the governor is, that's kind of a step down. I think that for a lot of people, at least mentally speaking, we here in Georgia, of course, know the story of Zell Miller, who took a very similar path in that he was governor, and then he went to the U.S. Senate, was appointed to the Senate, where he had a very tough time. He was there for one term and that was it. But he a Democrat, he fought with members of his own party. He identified more with the Republicans, and then of course made that switch formally. But I think that Governor Kemp was sort of taking some lessons, learning some lessons from Zell Miller's experience there. And I think the other question is, does Governor Kemp have his sights set on something bigger than the U.S. Senate? And we've talked about this a little bit. I think that from on a national level, I think that Governor Kemp also holds a lot of appeal when it comes to potential Republican presidential candidates going forward. We know that President Trump is not going to be running again. He can't for a third term. So who is going to take the mantle? It would be very interesting if Brian Kemp, someone who has sort of feuded with President Trump in the past, although their relationship apparently now is in a good place. But if he were to become one of the potential front runners, he is someone who obviously would appeal to conservatives, traditional Republicans, perhaps not the MAGA wing, the hardcore Trump wing of the Republican Party, of which there are many people. But Governor Kemp would appeal to the more traditional Republicans and also to the independent voters in this state who don't really identify with either party, are looking for somebody who can get things done, and who might see Governor Kemp as someone who fits the bill, as someone who could do that and who could attract the independent vote that we know is so important in any national election.
Well, now the speculation is who will run, continuing speculation as far as who will run for governor, who could run for the United States Senate. We tend to think when we're taught civics history in the American public educational system, that if you go to Washington, you're really at the pinnacle of your career. And yet we've seen congressional representatives like former Congressman Nathan Deal decide not to run for re-election in Congress and return to his home state, where he handily won 2 elections to Georgia governor. Now we're seeing names like Marjorie Taylor Greene perhaps considering a gubernatorial run. But let's talk about the U.S. Senate. We've seen now John Ossoff has officially announced last month, or in late March, I should say, his re-election campaign, with Governor Kemp bowing out of a 26 Senate campaign. The first Republican to enter that race is U.S. Rep. Buddy Carter, who has represented the Coastal District in Georgia in Congress since 2015. Marjorie Taylor Greene also being bandied about a little bit as far as a Senate candidate. Mike Collins, who is the author of the Lincoln-Riley Act, that he authored the very first bill to come out of this new Congress, and the first bill signed by President Donald Trump only a few days into his second term of office. Rich McCormick, John King, Insurance Commissioner, and finally Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, who you and I have talked about as a potential gubernatorial candidate.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you're right, and you've just run through the list of names. Buddy Carter, obviously, this week, the first to come out and formally declare his candidacy. He is very much of the Trump wing of the Republican Party, very MAGA, and his seat covers a good portion of the Savannah area here in Georgia, and so a lot of people would certainly view his candidacy as a serious one. I think that some of the other names you've mentioned as well, Marjorie Taylor Greene, someone who clearly has her sights set on something.
And is a prolific fundraiser.
She's a prolific fundraiser. She goes out and raises money for Republicans here in the state and nationally. Of course, she is very good at making headlines and getting herself in the news. And she is someone who would be a formidable candidate should she decide to run for the Republican nomination. She also, by the way, is talking about a potential run for governor. So it seems as though she wants some promotion of some kind, and she might be willing to take it wherever she can find it. But we'll see how that all plays out. You know, you talk about sort of the interesting, the Trump aspect of all of this. And a lot of these candidates, these names that have been mentioned, are very much, of in the Trump wing of the Republican Party, with the exception of Secretary of State Raffensperger, who, of course, famously stood up to President Trump in 2020, and someone who I'm sure President Trump would not be very happy if we saw Raffensperger as the Republican nominee for this U.S. Senate seat. But I do think that, like Governor Kemp, another person and another Republican who stood up to President Trump, I think that a lot of independent voters would take a serious look at Secretary Raffensperger, someone who might not be the most dynamic in terms of his personality, but he certainly does have the experience and the temperament to have a serious job like that.
Talking about the Trump influence, one of President Donald Trump's previously endorsed candidates, Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, is continuing to be rumored as seeking a gubernatorial campaign in 2026. That also, if he does indeed announce and decide he will step down as lieutenant governor to run for governor, that means that his seat will be, of course, vacant. We had heard that a state senator from the town of Vidalia, Blake Tillery, had filed paperwork to run for lieutenant governor, but we haven't heard an official announcement. We did, however, hear an official announcement earlier this week from State Senator Josh McLaurin, who is one of several candidates who are, again, have been rumored to be seeking the number two job here in the state of Georgia. Whoever is lieutenant governor may not have that high of a profile, but he or she is the president of the state senate and in a prime position to assist whoever is occupying the governor's mansion and getting the governor's legislative packages through the Senate and across the aisle in the State House.
Well, we're certainly seeing Burt Jones trying to parlay his role, his job as lieutenant governor, into something bigger. State Senator McLaurin is somebody who, a Democrat, who has been very outspoken against the Trump administration. He represents Sandy Springs in the state Senate here in Atlanta. And, I think that he'll get a lot of attention. Of course, Republicans have a pretty firm grip on the State House and the state Senate. So it would be very interesting to see a Democrat, be very unusual, I think, to see a Democrat be able to win a statewide office like lieutenant governor, but you never know. And Senator McLaurin obviously is very active on social media. He is very good at working with the members of the press. His office is always very responsive whenever I've reached out with a question while we're covering a news story. And so I think he would get some attention, but it's certainly a long shot bid for him.
Insofar as the Democratic Party of Georgia is concerned, obviously we were just speaking about State Senator Josh McLaurin, who is running for lieutenant governor for his party. This past weekend, the Democratic Party of Georgia elected a new chairman, Charlie Bailey, who is an attorney here in Atlanta. He is a twice run for statewide office. In 2018, he ran as a Democrat for the position of Attorney General, and several in the 2022 electoral cycle, he ran for lieutenant governor, race that was eventually won by Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, who was at that time a state senator. Rick, I was listening to our political reporter Doug Reardon's interview, which we have on Atlanta News First and AtlantaNewsFirst.com with Charlie Bailey. And one thing I found very interesting, he is really focusing on rebuilding the party at a grassroots level and really taking a pretty solid focus at reclaiming some Democratic seats in the Georgia General Assembly on both the House and the Senate side. You mentioned the Republicans have a pretty solid majority in the House and the Senate. But if the Democratic Party were to chip away a little bit at some of these seats, it might find itself in a more advantageous position as the 2030 census is coming up. Obviously, we know that every 10 years a census is conducted, and there is a lot of redistricting and reshuffling of House and Senate lines based on these new demographics. Whoever controls the governor's mansion and the state legislature will have the authority to draw those new lines. Charlie Bailey seems to be really focusing on reducing the Republican majority at the state legislative level.
Well, you would certainly expect him to say those things as the incoming chairman of the Democratic Party for the state of Georgia. He, of course, takes over for Congresswoman Nikema Williams, who a lot of Democrats, including Senator Ossoff, were upset with after the poor performance of Democrats in the last election cycle. She stepped aside, and now Charlie Bailey comes in to try to take the helm and try to really get the Democrats back on track for these elections, both statewide, both local elections and statewide elections. He's got a big job ahead of him, and even though Democrats hold currently both U.S. Senate seats here in Georgia, it still is very much a reddish state. And I think that the Democrats realize that they've got their work cut out for them. And so Bailey comes on board here and talking about wanting to, do more on the grassroots level and try to, win some of these local contests and chip away at the margins that Republicans have in their majority here at the state capitol. That sounds like a very good strategy, and we'll see how successful he is. Like I said, he certainly has his work cut out for him.
Well, these are just some of the topics we're continuing to cover here at Political Update here on Atlanta News First and AtlantaNewsFirst.com. A reminder, you can download and listen to all of the Atlanta News First podcast, Political Update, Decatur Dish, Overtime, and Behind the Investigation, all of our award-winning podcasts on your favorite podcasting platform via Spotify, Amazon, Apple Music, Pandora, or wherever you listen to your podcast. You can also watch all of the Atlanta News First podcast on YouTube and wherever you watch and listen to Atlanta News First on your streaming device. This has been Political Update for Friday, May 9th, 2025. For Rick Folbaum, I'm Tim Darnell. Thanks for watching and listening as we continue to cover Georgia, the most dynamic state in the nation, for political news and developments.
Thank you for watching ANF Plus. For more breaking news, live coverage, and your community stories, download the Atlanta News First app. You can also watch us on YouTube, Roku, Apple TV, and Fire TV. To join the conversation on YouTube Live, visit our channel and hit subscribe. You can also listen to the Atlanta News First podcast by searching Atlanta News First on your preferred listening platform.